The VapePassion Show, episode 48. In this episode, we're going to talk about the American Society of Plastic Surgeons recommending against vaping before surgery, new laws on shipping liquid nicotine, new DOT and FAA restrictions on shipping flavorings containing alcohol, how to pair wine with e-juice, what reviewers are saying about the iJoy Solo V2 box mod, and a DIY recipe for Grant's vanilla custard. Hey, welcome back to the VapePassion Show. This is episode 48, and I'm recording this on Monday, December 26th. If you're planning on buying any vape products anytime soon, and you want to support this show, go to vapepassion.com/vendors and buy from one of those links. There are more than 50 popular vendors listed. I'll get a commission for referring you, but it won't cost you anything extra. So Christmas is over, and we're all playing with our new toys. I didn't get anything vape related, but I got a little bit of cash that I might use towards some vape gear. We'll see. Even though I didn't get any vape gear, I did get some pretty cool stuff. So my wife, she got me a beard grooming kit, which is pretty awesome because I know that she doesn't like my beard. But she knows I want to grow it out for a while, so it's cool that she's supporting me. And in case you're wondering, my goal is to grow it out for 6 months, which will be the end of April. Any of you watching on YouTube can see how scraggly and messy it is, but I'm sticking with it. We also got a Keurig machine, which is awesome. It's kind of wasteful with the pods, but it's still a cool machine. We'll probably use the refillable pod when we get through all of the pods that we got for Christmas, so waste won't be that big of a problem. And the pods are recyclable too, so it's not that big of a deal. And I also got an Amazon Echo Dot, which is like Siri on the iPhone or Google Now on the Android. It's way better though because it's always listening, which some security experts actually say is a bad thing, but oh well. But it's cool because you can tell it to play music, it can tell you the latest news stories of the day, and even turn on devices if those devices have smart technology enabled. So pretty cool. That's really all that I got for Christmas, but yeah, it was a good Christmas. My daughter got a ton of toys. She's so spoiled, but yeah, really cool. I also want to give a shout out to a YouTube channel that I subscribe to called FDA Final Rule. He was recommended to me by one of my subscribers, Rebecca A. This channel is run by Jacob Clare, I believe that's his name. He actually gave me a very positive shout out in one of his recent videos, and I wanted to return the favor. So the FDA Final Rule channel focuses pretty much entirely on the FDA's regulations on vaping products and how these regulations affect us as vapors and the industry as a whole. So I do my best to understand and explain the rules and regulations that the government puts on the vape industry, but Jacob is an expert. So if that's something you're interested in, go check him out. I'll put a link to his channel in the show notes. I also want to give a word of warning to my YouTube subscribers because I plan to publish a ton of videos. These are all segments from my last 10 or so vlogs. So you might have seen a lot of them already, but I wanted to separate them from the vlogs so that the information is easier to find for anyone searching for that stuff. So you'll probably see a bunch of videos show up in your YouTube feed soon, so sorry about that. All right, now let's do a beer pairing, which I try to do most weeks. So this one is called El Goza from Avery Brewing Company. This is a German-style sour ale with lime and sea salt added. So from what I find, the flavors it pairs best with are orange, lime, and lemon. I don't have any orange e-juices, but I do have a lemon e-juice. I'm going to pair it with Pound It from Bonsai Vapors, and that's a lemon pound cake flavor. So let's go ahead and give that a try. It's a pretty good beer, but it's not as sour as I was expecting. I guess it has a slight sourness. I can taste that lime too. Yeah, the lemon pound cake actually does seem to pair pretty well with that beer. That lemon, the sourness of the lemon, I guess, kind of complements the sourness of the beer. So pretty good. And you know what? Actually, I do have a lime flavored e-juice that I want to try with this too. It's a dank sauce from G Vapors, and that's a marshmallow key lime pie. So let me get that loaded up and I'm going to try that too. Okay, got that loaded up. By the way, if you're wondering what I'm using, this is the old IPv4. This used to be my go-to mod. I loved it. It's very basic, doesn't really do a whole lot, but it was always very reliable and sturdy. But I haven't used it in a long time, and now that I'm using it again, it feels kind of uncomfortable in my hand. It's really big, but yeah, it still works fine. Pretty good mod. Anyway, oh, and I have the goon on top. So, all right, let's give that a shot with this beer. Oh, that's way better. That key lime pie goes really well with this beer. That is really good. I gotta take another one. Man, that's a really good pairing. Okay, so let's talk about some other topics. So first I want to talk about the American Society of Plastic Surgeons recommending against vaping before surgery. So first, a little history about the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, or the ASPS. They represent more than 94% of all board certified plastic surgeons in the United States. And they are the largest plastic surgery organization in the world. They're a very well-respected organization. If I was ever to recommend a cosmetic or plastic surgeon, I would only recommend a doctor listed by them. Unfortunately, they aren't so knowledgeable about vaping. So ASPS member Peter Taub recently published a paper in the ASPS journal titled E-Cigarettes and Potential Implications for Plastic Surgery. So with all surgeries, not just cosmetic, it's a pretty well-known fact that smoking tobacco can cause complications and problems with healing. It makes sense that doctors would recommend that smokers not smoke prior to surgery. But in Taub's paper, he suggests that plastic surgeons should advise their patients to abstain from vaping for 4 weeks prior to operation as well. So he made some pretty bold claims, such as that there's little evidence that people who smoke ever fully switch to e-cigarettes. First, even if this statement was true, Taub isn't writing a paper about the efficacy of electronic cigarettes on quitting smoking. This isn't his area of expertise, and it has nothing to do with vaping as it relates to surgical procedures. He also said that vaping may even prolong the habit by providing a dose of nicotine at times when getting one from a traditional cigarette is inconvenient, suggesting that people are vaping when they normally wouldn't smoke. Now that one might actually be true in some cases. It's something that I've heard other vapors mention, but something to consider is that vaping is drastically less harmful than smoking, and I mean magnitude safer. Even if people are using electronic cigarettes when they normally wouldn't smoke, it's nowhere near as harmful as smoking. He went on to say that e-cig users have voluntarily reported that using e-cigs have resulted in hospitalization for illnesses such as pneumonia, congestive heart failure, disorientation, seizure, hypotension, and other health problems. Now, I'm not aware of any research that backs any of those claims. I'll admit that as a vapor, I can be biased in favor of e-cigs, but I also never shy away from reading research that portrays vaping in a negative light. For example, I've talked about the dangers of diacetyl in e-juice and the dangers of dry burning coil wire. You might not agree with me on those issues, but I'm just pointing out that I'm not afraid to say negative things about vaping if I think I should. Anyway, I've read a lot of research over the years, and I can't remember anything that ever made the claim that Taub did about health issues. I've seen forum posts where people have asked if vaping might be causing issues like this, but I've never seen a study suggesting that it's happening to a large group of people. So Taub believes that based on what he knows, e-cigs should be treated like traditional cigarettes and that doctors should advise their patients to cease e-cigarette use before surgery. Dr. Farsalinos also commented on Taub's paper. Farsalinos said, "I precisely counted the number of studies cited that e-cigarettes have adverse effects in humans post-operatively after plastic surgery or any kind of surgical procedure. I managed to find exactly 0 studies addressing this issue." And one of the studies that Taub cited was actually one that Farsalinos did, and Dr. Farsalinos commented on this one as well. He said, "I can reassure you, neither this nor any of my studies present complications following surgery that are related to nicotine or electronic cigarettes." Farsalinos also points out several instances of Taub misinterpreting the results of the studies that were cited, mostly confusing the use of nicotine with smoking, which are clearly not the same thing. And actually, these studies show that nicotine doesn't have any adverse effects on wound healing, and that using nicotine replacement therapy is associated with fewer complications compared to smoking. So basically, Taub's paper is clearly poorly researched and full of misinterpretations of data. It's surprising that the ASPS hasn't removed the paper from their journal already. All right, now let's talk about new laws on shipping liquid nicotine. I want to thank Bob, one of my subscribers, for sending this one over to me. So here's some news that is sure to disappoint the DIYers out there. Nicotine River, they're a popular liquid nicotine supplier. They sent out an email discussing new compliance rules regarding the shipping of nicotine. According to the Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration, liquid nicotine in strengths higher than 60 milligrams are now considered a Class 6.1 toxic substance. This classification means that they need to be shipped as hazmat by the DOT and cannot be shipped through USPS or FedEx. They're also not allowed to be shipped express or overnight, which leaves UPS ground the only option. So this is a pretty big setback for a lot of e-juice DIYers out there. Most liquid nicotine suppliers will ship as high as 100 milligram nicotine, which would classify as a class 6.1 toxic substance. This means that if you're ordering higher than 60 milligrams nicotine, you will have to plan ahead for longer shipping times. And if you're ordering anything in addition to liquid nicotine, you'll probably want to order separately from the nicotine so that the rest of your order doesn't have to go through UPS ground. That really sucks because many vendors offer free shipping for orders that meet a certain cost threshold. But if you order separately, you might not meet that criteria anymore. So in this case, I would suggest reaching out to your nicotine vendor and asking if you can submit one order but have other products shipped separately. But with the way e-commerce platforms work, this would probably be difficult and the vendor would say no, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Also in that email from Nicotine River, they mentioned that there are new DOT and FAA restrictions on shipping flavorings containing alcohol. So according to the Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration, flavor concentrates that are considered flammable will need to be listed as hazmat, which means they can't be shipped overnight or express, and just like with 60 milligrams or higher nicotine, can only be shipped via UPS ground. These are flavors that have alcohol in them. So Nicotine River, they put up a page on their website that lists a lot of popular flavors from the Flavor Apprentice and Capella that are considered flammable. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So if you use any flavorings that contain alcohol, you can expect longer shipping times. And like with 60 milligram nicotine or 60 milligram plus nicotine, you should order separately from other flavorings so that you don't slow your entire order down. These are laws that all vendors will need to abide by. If a vendor isn't following the rules, they will soon, or they'll have to pay large fines. So expect this to hit all of the vendors you buy from. All right, now let's talk about how to pair wine with e-juice. With New Year's Eve right around the corner, I thought talking about wines would be a good topic to cover. I know most people celebrate the New Year with champagne, which is a sparkling wine, but just about every New Year's party I've ever gone to also served many other types of wine leading up to the ball drop. Now, I'm not much of a wine person myself, but I like to drink wine every once in a while. So last week, Totally Wicked, a well-known vape company, published a fun article on their blog about how to pair wines with e-juices. With the help of a fine wine expert, they put together a great list of tips for wine lovers out there. So first, let's get into some basics. According to the Totally Wicked author, his name is Daniel, but they didn't give his last name, so I don't know who he is. But anyway, he says, the key is in trying to find a balance, either with contrasting flavors or complementary flavors. He also mentions that wine is known for having specific characteristics, such as fruit, acidity, and tannin. Tannin is a bitter tasting substance. Too much of any of these characteristics in a wine will drown out the flavor of your e-juice. Too little of these characteristics will result in the e-juice drowning out the flavor of the wine. All right, now let's get into some more specific tips. So first, let's talk about wine body. So the body of wines are described as light, medium, and heavy, which explains the way a wine feels inside of our mouth. The main factor of a wine's body is alcohol, and that's a good starting point for figuring out what type of body your wine has. Wine with more alcohol becomes more viscous, creating a heavy, fuller mouthfeel, while low alcohol is thinner and considered light-bodied, generally, not always. So usually any wine under 12.5% alcohol is usually considered a light-bodied wine. Examples would include Riesling, Grenache, and Italian Prosecco. Wines between 12.5 and 13.5% alcohol have a medium body, and that would include wines like French Burgundy, Sauvignon Blanc, and Pinot Grigio. And then anything over 13.5% alcohol is considered heavy or full-bodied. This would include wines like Zinfandel, Shiraz, Merlot, Chardonnay, Malbec, and Cabernet. So with all of that in mind, the wine expert that Totally Wicked reached out to says that heavier bodied wines require heavier flavors. Heavy e-juice flavors might include flavors like caramel, toffee, and dark fruits. All right, now let's talk about wine acidity. So another flavor benefit of wine is the acidity. The acidity of wine is known to cut through rich flavors and cleanse the palate, which means it can do the same thing with e-juice. White wines usually have more acidity than reds, and lower bodied wines tend to have more acidity than heavier bodied wines. So a few wines that are considered to have high acidity include wines like Grenache, Burgundy, Sangiovese, Chianti, Valpolicella, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, Sancerre, and Champagne. So if you want to give the flavor of your e-juice a lift while also cleansing your palate after every drink, you might choose to go with a lighter bodied, higher acidic wine. All right, now let's talk about salty flavors and tannin. So like I mentioned earlier, tannin imparts a bitter flavor to wines and is usually caused by fruit skins, such as from grapes and from wood. Tannins are also what cause some wines to leave your mouth feeling dry. Tannins are usually found in red wines, but can also be found in wooden barrel-aged white wines because of the wood. So generally, wines with high tannin don't usually pair well with salty foods. This isn't going to be much of a problem for vapors because salty e-juices really aren't a thing. Although after Charlie Noble released their PB cereal recipe, which contained saline as an ingredient, many people became more interested in the idea of salty flavored e-juices. I personally have never tasted a salty e-juice, but some e-juices that might have a salty flavor could be peanut butter flavors, lime margaritas, and salted caramels. I've also heard that Mount Baker Vapor's Ocean Breeze and Afternoon Delight both have a bit of saltiness. So if you are vaping any salty flavors, stay away from high tannin wines such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Tempranillo, Montepulciano, Petit Syrah, Petit Verdot, and Nebbiolo. All right, now let's talk about pairing e-juice with sweet wines. So when pairing wines with desserts, wine experts usually recommend that your wine is sweeter than the dessert. If there's an imbalance of sweetness, it won't pair well. Sweetness is one of the biggest characteristics. Now, as we all know, sweetness is one of the biggest characteristics of e-juice, considering that so many popular e-juices on the market are desserts, fruits, and candies. If you're trying to find a wine that pairs well with a sweet e-juice, look for dessert wines. So let's talk about red wines first. Semi-sweet red wines, they pair well with candied fruit or floral flavors. These wines include Lambrusco, Brachetto de Acqui, and Recioto della Valpolicella. Sweet red wines pair well with fruit jam and chocolate flavors. These wines include Port, Banyuls, and Mari. And very sweet red wines pair well with figs, dates, and raisin flavors. These wines include Tawny Port and Vinsanto Rosso. All right, now let's talk about some white wines. So semi-sweet white wines pair well with tropical fruit and perfume flavors. These wines include Moscato and Gewürztraminer. Sweet white wines pair well with sweet lemon and honey flavors. These wines would include late harvest white wines, Sauternes, ice wine, Auslese Riesling, and Tokaji. And very sweet white wines pair well with raisin, fig, and apricot jam flavors. These wines include a white port, muscatel dessert wine, Pasito wines, and Vinsanto. The flavors I mentioned above for each variety of wine are actual food choices, not e-juice flavors, but I included them just to give you a reference. Basically, the sweeter the e-juice, the sweeter the wine you should pair with it. For example, if you're vaping something with a ton of sweetener, like an e-juice from One Hit Wonder or Enjoy's Artist Collection, you would be better to go with the sweetest wine you can possibly find. So like I mentioned, I don't know much about wines. If you're a wine aficionado, you're probably pretty upset with my pronunciation of some of the wines mentioned in this video, but I hope you still found some of this information helpful. As far as New Year's Eve parties go, you'll probably be drinking champagne, which is typically sweeter, lighter bodied, and has higher acidity. So if you want to pair something with champagne, based on the info that I found, you should look for a sweet and rich flavored e-juice. All right, now let's talk about what reviewers are saying about the iJoy Solo V2 200 watt box mod. So this week I want to do something a little different and take a look at what bigger reviewers are saying about the iJoy Solo V2. I haven't used this device myself, but all of the big reviewers have released their reviews of it, and I wanted to pull all of that information together and give you the rundown. First, let's quickly talk about the specs. The kit comes with the iJoy Solo V2 200 watt box mod and the limitless sub-ohm tank. You can get the kit for around $70 to $80. So the iJoy Solo V2 comes in black, silver, white, yellow, or teal. It's a dual 18650 mod and it runs in series configuration. Has spring-loaded battery contacts, spring-loaded 510 connector, it's firmware upgradable. It has ramp-up features of soft, normal, or hard, and that determines how fast it ramps up before you get your full hit. Has temp control. It supports nickel, titanium, and stainless steel. It also has a temperature coefficient that you can set manually for other wires. The resistance range is from 0.06 to 3 ohms. The output voltage is 1 to 9 volts, and it has a taste control feature. This is not temp control, but it works similarly. It's designed to protect from dry hits on any type of wire, even Kanthal. It's more like burn prevention rather than temp control. Now, as for the tank, it's a top fill tank. It doesn't have any airflow control, holds 2 mils of e-liquid. The coils available for it are 0.6 ohms, which is rated at 20 to 40 watts, and 0.3 ohms, which is rated at 40 to 80 watts. These coils are called chip coils, and they light up when you vape them. With this tank, there's no replacement glass, and it has a removable chuff cap and adapter so that you can use your own drip tip. So first, let's talk about Vape and Fagan's review. So Mark, Vape and Fagan, he says that the iJoy Solo V2 is a lot like the iJoy RDTA box mod, but without the built-in tank. It has the same screen, chip, and the same features. It's practically the same thing. He says that although the 510 is spring-loaded, it's just slightly, and it's actually pretty stiff. He doesn't think it's as spring-loaded as it should be. He says that it has large firing button, which is very clicky and a joy to use. The screen is beautiful. It has a large font. It's nice and bright. The screen only has useful info, nothing unnecessary, and you can see it just fine in the sun. The power mode and temp mode seems to be very accurate. The ramp up features are especially good when you're trying to ramp up large or very low ohm coils, and the menu is very simple and easy to use. He also talked a bit about the taste control feature. He says that depending on the atomizer and build of atomizer, there is a noticeable difference. He compared it to cruise control in a car. Basically, it doesn't let coils get too hot. He didn't notice much of a difference on a tank, but it is noticeable on RDAs. So he had two cons about the iJoy Solo V2. He says that it can't charge over USB and it has ugly artwork, but that's about it. And then he talked about the tank. So he says the tank is basically like a Limitless XL mini sub-ohm tank. So if you have a Limitless XL, you'll be familiar with this new tank. And as far as the tank goes, Mark says that the iJoy has provided a lot in a small package, and overall it's a nice tank. So Mark says that the iJoy Solo V2 is an awesome device. He loves it and he highly recommends it. The tank isn't bad, but he does recommend pairing the device with a better atomizer. All right, now let's talk about the review from Big Lou, East Coast Review. So he also says that it's a lot like the RDTA box, which he loves. He mentions that overdrippers should beware of the slide cover. If you shake the extra juice out of your atomizer after overdripping, the slide cover will slide off and your device will go flying. Lou said that he doesn't use the taste control feature, but he did use it a couple of times and didn't notice any difference. He mentioned that the drip tip adapter that comes with the tank is threaded, which means you need a threaded drip tip to use it, which wouldn't be very useful. But I've actually seen other reviewers use their drip tips on it just fine, so that's not true. But Big Lou did demonstrate that the tip he had didn't fit right and it wobbled around, so it seems like it might work okay for some drip tips and not others. Overall, he says that the device works well and he recommends it. He also liked that it can fire a 0.8 build at 170 watts, which he says most regulated devices can't do. All right, now let's talk about Mike Vape's review. So Mike Vapes, he pointed out that on the Solo V2 that he tested, the puff counter doesn't work. He said that for every 3 hits or so, the device would only register 1 hit. As for the taste control feature, he said that it works sometimes and other times it doesn't work at all. He also tested various sized atomizers and found that 25mm atomizers will have a slight overhang, but 24 and 22mm atomizers look great. For the tank, he says that it's kind of hard to take the tank apart because there's nothing to grab. He also tested the drip tip adapter and fit a drip tip from Half Moon Mods on it just fine. It was nice and snug. And Mike's overall opinion of the Solo V2 is that it's a dope device, fires right away, has no rattling, the form factor is nice, and he's really impressed with it. All right, and then I watched a review from Aspen Valley Vapes on this. So they didn't really have anything different to say that other reviewers didn't already point out, but he did point out that it's hard to get the tank off the device because the base of the tank is so small. He said it's really difficult to get a good grip on it and that you have to be careful not to twist the glass off when trying to get the tank off of a device. But other than that, he liked the device and the tank. All right, the Vapor Trail channel. So he also seemed to like the Solo V2 overall. He didn't talk about the tank because he did a review for it some other time, but he did talk about the device. So the one thing worth pointing out was his thoughts on taste control. Like other reviewers, he found that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But overall, it was a positive review. And then finally, Daniel from DJ LSB Vapes. This wasn't a full review, just some quick thoughts after he unboxed it. But he said that it doesn't have the best paint job. Removing the batteries is really easy. The housing is snug with no play at all. And there is a little rattling on the firing button. So that's the iJoy Solo V2 and the Limitless sub-ohm tank. It sounds like the mod is nearly identical to the iJoy RDTA box, which is good because everyone pretty much loves the RDTA box. The biggest difference is that the Solo V2 doesn't have a built-in tank, which means you can use any atomizer you want, whereas with the RDTA box, you are restricted to using only one of the 10 available iJoy combo atomizer decks. It seems like everyone agrees that it's a nice device and performs as it should. The biggest con seems to be that the taste control doesn't work very well. iJoy used taste control in their earlier a Solo 200 watt box mod and it didn't work all that great then either. But other than that, it looks good, it feels good, it's easy to use, and overall, it seems to be worth buying. All right, now let's do some DIY. So this one is a recipe for Grant's Vanilla Custard. The reason I want to make this recipe is because Grant's Vanilla Custard is so hard to get. They only make and sell batches a couple of times per year, and they sell out really fast. They're also in the UK, which means expensive and slow shipping to the US, which is where I live. So I finally got my hands on some Grant's Vanilla Custard after first learning about it probably a year ago. I've been vaping on it a bit over the past week and I really like it. So now let's make the DIY version and see how it compares. Okay, so for this recipe we need only 2 flavors really, dulce de leche from the Flavor Apprentice and vanilla custard V1 from Capella. So I'm gonna only make a small 10 ml bottle of this, and I've already got a little old bottle cleaned out. I need 0.2 grams of dulce de leche from the Flavor Apprentice, or the Perfumer's Apprentice, and then 0.75 of vanilla custard V1. This is a 30-70 PG-VG ratio that I'm making here, so I will be using 8.8 grams of VG. And then lastly, I need 0.62 grams of 100 milligram nicotine, and that's PG based. And I only need 0.62 grams of that. Started using this PG nicotine. It's so much easier to use than VG based because it's so much thinner. Okay, and then I need 1.51 grams of PG. And that's it. Let's try it out. All right, here we go. Got it all ready. So something to note about both of the flavors that are used in this e-juice is that they have questionable ingredients. Both dulce de leche from TFA and vanilla custard V1 from Capella have acetone and acetylpropanil. The vanilla custard might also contain diacetyl. I say may because it's not confirmed. There have been tests done on it, but the levels are so low that it wasn't detected above 0.4%. Although people do seem pretty confident that diacetyl is in it. If you're okay with that, then I say make it this as is, otherwise find similar flavors that you like better. So I got this recipe from a user over at ecigaretteforum.com. He says that he read somewhere that the original recipe for Grant's vanilla custard is 15% vanilla custard from Capella and 2% dulce de leche from the Flavor Apprentice. People who have made this recipe confirm that it's definitely Capella's vanilla custard. There's no mistaking it. It does seem that dulce de leche is very likely an ingredient too, but the unknown part seems to be if the ratios are accurate. The user who posted the recipe mentioned that vanilla custard flavor is great for the first 2 weeks, but then it turns bitter. So he reduced it to 7.5% and left dulce de leche at 2%, which seems to be much better over longer periods of time. But if you're only making small batches that won't last longer than 2 weeks, 15% is probably fine. A lot of DIY experts also say that custards take around a month to steep, so it might taste a lot more accurate after letting it sit for a few weeks. I also saw some comments from people who have modified this recipe a bit by adding additional flavors. For example, one person dropped vanilla custard to 12% and then added 4% Black Mild Plus from Tobacco Express, which would give it a custardy, black and mild cigar flavor. I've also seen recommendations of adding butterscotch flavoring to make it taste like butterscotch pudding, or you can add caramel or chocolate. Someone else also mentioned that adding a touch of Capella's sweet strawberry is good too. A lot of people are saying that it's not sweet enough, so they've added a bit of sweetener to it, something like 2 to 3% ethyl maltol or a couple of drops of sucralose. So that might be something you want to try too. Overall, a lot of people are saying that this recipe is very close, but not exact, although still very good, especially when it's freshly mixed. So let's give that a quick shot. First, let's go with the reference. This is Grant's Vanilla Custard in here. I got it on the Veritas RDA at 25 watts. Very good. All right, now let's try the clone. Now this is the Freak Show Mini, also at 25 watts. Not at all. Oh, that's too bad. That's not at all like Grant's Vanilla Custard. It's still good, but the vanilla isn't really coming out. I actually wonder if the vanilla custard I was using was V1, because I've heard that V2 isn't the same. I don't know. On eCig Express it did say it was V1, so who knows, but it's definitely not the same. The vanilla doesn't come out enough. The custard doesn't come out enough. So yeah, I don't know what the deal is. And I did 15%, so well, that's too bad. I was really looking forward to having a clone of this. It's still good though. All right, well that's all I have for this week. You'll find the show notes for this episode on VapePassion.com. Just do a search for episode 48. If you want to support the show, consider donating to my Patreon page at patreon.com/VapePassion. You can follow me on Twitter at VapePassion. I'm also on Facebook if you want to leave me a comment. If you like this weekly show, please consider giving me a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. You can also subscribe to the podcast version of the show on either iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. If you'd like to get notifications of new reviews or of this show, you can sign up to receive my weekly email on VapePassion.com. I send that out on Thursdays, usually. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me anytime at alex@vapepassion.com. All right, I'll see you next week.